Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining our session today. Really appreciate your time. My name is Jim Rowan, a principal at Deloitte and leader of our strategy and analytics practice. I also run all of our AI go-to-market activities for the US firm. And we are really excited to talk to you today about some of the activities that are going on in the AI and Gen AI space. It's hard to imagine a time where we don't talk about AI and Gen AI. It's a household word across the world, and something that's really exciting to understand what's going on in the market. But more importantly, what are organizations doing today with the technology? How are people taking initial ideas and bringing them to scale? And so we have some great leaders on the phone today that were working in the AI space before generative AI was that household world that we talk about. So first, I want to do a quick introduction with the individuals we have for our panel, and then we'll dive into some questions. Anthony, I'm going to turn over to you first. Would you mind doing a brief introduction, please?
Thank you, Jim. Glad to be here. My name is Anthony Fernando. I'm currently the president and CEO of Asensus Surgical. Been with the company almost 9 years, and I'm an engineer by training.
Great, thank you, Anthony. And Tomer, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tomer Gal. I'm the managing director in Deloitte of the deep learning and HPC team, which basically came to Deloitte through the acquisition of Optimizer, the company that I founded on 2015. And we joined Deloitte on the 1st of January. So it's a new year and in the exact time.
And welcome to Deloitte, and we're happy to have you part of the team. And Laura, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Shact, and I'm a principal at Deloitte Consulting. I lead our AI practice within human capital. I live in Silicon Valley, and I advise the leading tech and media companies around tech talent strategy, where I've done that for about 2 decades. And I'm here today to share the workforce implications as we think about AI, really the human implications as we increasingly see AI in the workplace with us.
That's great. Thank you, Laura. A huge topic that I think a lot of people want to hear more about as well. So Anthony, maybe I'd love to start with you for a little bit. And as you think about Asensus being only about 18 years old, right? And making that substantial pivot in around 2018 with AI and to AI as an enabler for the organization. How do you think about AI continuing to drive change in your business?
Sure, Jim. I think let me first take a step back, just a little bit about what we do. So we are in the business of digitizing surgery, and we leverage robotics and a whole suite of digital technology that includes machine learning and augmented intelligence for our practice. So if you think about the history, a good outcome in surgery historically was primarily dependent on the surgeon's skill, the surgeon's experience, and the years of training that they received. And that has done well for us, for all of us globally, and continues to be that way. And even if you think about a surgeon today graduating from a doctor graduating from medical school, in order to become a surgeon, they undergo something north of 5,000 hours of training, even after graduating medical school, to become a surgeon. So it's a pretty big commitment. So, but even with that commitment, still you see a myriad of complications in surgery. Just in the US alone, it's almost 2 million surgical related complications that take place. So where does augmented intelligence come in? And that's kind of the pivot that we made, was saying that should not be something acceptable with the types of technologies that are available to us today. And that's kind of where digital comes into play, where with the data that's available and with the technologies, deep learning technologies that are available, where we can augment the surgeon, where we are able to learn best practices from everywhere and be able to deploy it anywhere on demand, so that the outcomes can be predictable, irrelevant of the level of skill or training of the surgeon, and then be able to deliver a consistent outcome to the patient community, and then also overall to health systems to reduce complications. So I think for us, it's a very interesting time. in where we are and the availability of technology, and glad to be on this journey.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And you hit on one of the interesting things too that I think comes up a lot when we talk about AI is how accurate and predictable can it be? Because to use it in such a critical part, humans' life's at stake in some of these conversations, you have to be very accurate. And so, Tomer, you've been involved in this journey with the team through Optimizer and what you've been working on. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about what your team has been doing and how they've been helping both on the speed side of things as well as sort of the accuracy side of things?
Okay, so we have been partnering with Asensus for many years. We developed major aspects of the system, especially in the aspects of accelerated computing. Now, the goal was to transition algorithms from the CPU to the GPU and maintain the level of accuracy. So for these aspects, you have like test-driven development. You must compare the algorithms as long as you have this as a baseline. And there will be differences because you have floating point number representation, differences between GPU and CPU. It's never bit exact. So you have to take this into consideration. Now, once you do this transition, once you have your algorithms on the GPU, so this will be your gold standard. Now, regarding the aspects of quality, there are many aspects, plus there are safety mechanisms. So you want your neural networks models to be as accurate as possible, plus you want to have safety mechanisms. For example, if you're tracking now a tool during the surgery, so you want to also have an algorithm that detects within each frame, did we detect the tool in relatively close proximity, things like this. So you do have this logic for safety. Beyond that, you are doing whatever you can in the aspects of safety, especially for medical devices. So beyond the unit test, etc., you also have code coverage. There are tons of things that our engineers and, of course, Asensus engineers are doing to provide the best product possible.
Makes a lot of sense, Tomer. And again, sort of it's fascinating how we're linking together the importance of speed, quality, accuracy, continuing to improve with AI. This move from CPU to GPU, right, was also really important with that. And then you zoom out. So we're talking a lot of bits and bytes, but at the end of the day, there's a human involved in this equation, both as a doctor and as a patient. And Laura, you spend a lot of time with our clients dealing with these human implications of change, how AI is changing the world. We see a lot of people with a lot of enthusiasm and excitement. They want to learn a lot about AI. But then we also hear some folks talking about some of their concerns and some of their fears around it. I mean, how are you addressing some of this with some of your clients today?
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting when we think about trust, because we talk a lot as we're thinking about AI, like trust in the technology, right? Check the news headlines. We're poking apart what LLMs across what all these big tech companies are providing. And so there's a fear and sort of a distrust already with the tech. And then add what's happening in the workforce, right? We're already at a place where we have multiple generations. We have individuals coming out of the pandemic. We have individuals coming out of a lot of workforce reduction activity already. And so there's already kind of some noise in the system around, do employers trust their employees? Do employees trust their employers? And then we lay over AI, right? And pretty consistently, executives and leaders at organizations are more enthusiastic about the AI necessarily than their workers. And it really comes down to painting a vision of what that means for their organization. So when I think about trust, there's something really interesting we have at Deloitte called the Trust ID, so a trust index that we've been doing for over 5 years. It's a survey that has over 350,000 data points about trust, both of really customers' trust in a brand, but also what companies' trust is from their employees. And we did some recent research around AI. And I think that was interesting because, first of all, we know trust really matters. So we have data that says employees are 50% less likely to leave an organization that they trust. And then when you lay over AI, some of the questions that we asked respondents were, what happens to your trust level? Like, for example, when your company introduces a new AI technology, and their trust had this measurable drop, like 53%. So they saw their company, their employer, as less human, less empathetic. And that kind of puts a little wrench in things as we're thinking about engaging in these new technologies, right, for their benefit, for new value, for efficiency. And so what I really have a conversation with the organizations that we work with is, how can you think about being more human, more empathetic, and more transparent? So with being more human is, hey, let's talk about what are the real life ways that we're using AI in our workforce with like actual humans and stories and benefits. Being empathetic and really acknowledging what is the resistance and the fear, right? I mean, this happens in many organizations. If they're rolling out some sort of co-pilot tool for efficiency, there's a lot of fear. If I show the organization I'm that much more efficient, what happens to the roles like mine? And then being as transparent as possible. And I say that because many organizations are just figuring out, right? We're very early in the journey with generative AI of understanding how it's going to impact our workforce in different functions at different rates and different sectors. So that transparency is being clear on what the value is and the role of AI in the organization, and also what you know and what you don't know and how you're making decisions, particularly around technology and being trustworthy, and how you're going to make really calculated decisions and steps along the way, involving the workforce to be able to co-create and be part of that with you.
That's great. I love this idea too of, it's sort of like I've heard someone talk about sort of the IQ and the EQ side of this equation too, and sort of that emotional connection we need to make with individuals about the changes that they're experiencing is so important. And so after hearing a little bit what Laura was talking about as well, I'd love for your thoughts, Anthony, a little bit about, as you started this journey, what were some of your thoughts about trust, and how did you guys start to think through this as an organization?
Yeah, Jim, I think, trust, empathy, these are all very important topics. But there's also a myth, right? The word AI, the term AI has this myth saying, oh, the human's going to be removed from the process, kind of a myth. But especially when it comes to surgery and medical devices, we kind of address that head on, saying that's not the fact here. We augment the surgeon. And the goal is not to take the surgeon out of the picture. And the goal here is to help enhance the surgeon's capabilities. So I think there are several things, right, in order to make this work for us. And when we think about developing systems, the demographics of the data we collect is significantly important. And the quality and availability of good data. And also, kind of trying to engage with the users and stakeholders, because not everybody has the same need, even though the end result might be kind of the same thing that folks are looking for. And transparency is a hugely important part for us in the customers and surgeons or even hospital systems. They want to understand how we employ certain algorithms and tools to deliver the suggested direction or insight or decision to them. So I think trying to explain that is significantly important, and then also educating the surgeons and hospitals that this is the iterative process. Just the first go around might not get the best result, but if we can continue on this journey, that it only gets better. So I think trying to take all of that into account, and while being in a highly regulated environment, there's data privacy, there's cybersecurity, and there's all the medical device regulatory, and then there's country-specific regulatory. So we had to implement all of this while factoring in all the regulatory constraints that's available to us. So it's a systematic process, and it's something that will continue to evolve and grow.
It makes sense. And I think one of the things that I'm sort of thinking through is, as you're dealing with this, you're trying to explain to everyone, this is going to go faster, it's going to be better, but there's hey, you got to trust, you don't want to give them a black box and say, well, just trust us on it. So I mean, you must have dealt with a little bit of this in terms of how you thought to get to that accelerated computing and how you were building towards that. Tomer, maybe do you have some thoughts on like how you guys are thinking about making the models more explainable or more visible to the team so they could figure out and understand what was going on?
There are many aspects. There is the aspect, like you say, of explainable AI. This is one aspect. Another aspect of all of this development is integrating all of this into real-time systems with all of the considerations that you have here. So if we look at this part of the computing, so without going too much technical, but you have a system which is video-based, you have multiple cameras, and you should be able to process like 60 frames per second, 4K, and all of this should be done with very low latency, because if you introduce any latency here, that means that the one doing the procedure will have a latency versus the reality, and that's of course not allowed. So anyway, you go to the lowest level there, we do know what happens on the level of each frame during the development, and there are many mechanisms during the testing, during the development, and also understanding what's going on the system in runtime. Sometimes it might involve multiple GPUs even. So when things are acting differently, we do analyze to that level. We do know what happened when data was transferred from the CPU to the GPU. What happened if this data transfer took longer time? What happened if there was a bigger latency in a certain duration? And then we can find out maybe another process was running in the system. Anyway, so this development goes down to the lowest level of details possible, and that's what you usually expect to see in medical devices of very high quality.
Got it. And that makes sense. And too, you were also spending a lot of time thinking about, how you were going to integrate some of these capabilities into sort of the broader part of the workplace and how that was fitting in as well, and how these are developed with, I guess, empathy, inclusivity. So we've got like explainability, but were there specific like design questions? Like Anthony, when you were starting with some of this stuff, were there specific things or goals that you laid out for the team that said, this is how we have to keep these things in mind as we start to do the design?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think one is around latency, like Tomer talked about. I think it gets a little bit one more step complicated than what Tomer said. We do everything in 3D. So it takes it one layer deeper of complexity while trying to be, processing being done within a frame, so to speak. But I think the other piece, more focused on the user, is going back to building trust and confidence so that they fully understand what they are receiving in terms of insight or a suggestion or what they are looking at. And even though some might say, oh, just give me the result, but helping them understand how this result was generated tends to help a lot in them trying to have more credibility and confidence in what they're seeing. So as a result, they tend to use it more. So early days, there was, I would say, there was quite a lot of questions around how do I know what you're saying is accurate, because we do certain things like measurement and we say it's plus minus 1 to 2 millimeters in accuracy. So we had to go through the journey of proving that is the case. Even though we've done our validation, we've gotten our FDA approvals, all of that, we've done all the proof, but to the user, we had to do it on a different scale in order to make sure that they believe in what this technology was, and bring them, kind of work with them through the journey of adoption.
And so, I mean, Laura, I want to bring you into this conversation too. As we think about users' journey, adoption, that seems like a fundamental systems design challenge we've been talking about for years, AI or not AI. So are there just like fundamental things we always be considering here in this type of situation?
Yeah, I love that, because this is just a core kind of change management problem, is the way that I think about it, or opportunity, really. One of the ways we think about how do we help people understand, especially like how do we engage, now we have this great robotic assistance and technology, is really understanding the user right? So usually there are some differences between our stakeholders, right? Maybe there's a surgeon and there's like a set of different individuals. And so really understanding their needs, almost when you take human-centered design and like, what's the persona? What is this person? What will they view as a positive or a negative? What's their background of the way that they've performed, surgery and had years of study coming into the situation, to really understand what will be viewed positively, what will be viewed, potentially as a threat. And then really have it, baking in the time, I think, to adjust to all of that. So I love what you were just saying. We needed to have education, right? People really want to understand the ins and outs of the technology. People want to understand the vision, like, where is this going? How is this going to fit into? Is this going to be like a fad, or is this something we're going to stick with? Like, I need to have confidence in it. And then I think reiterating, right, feeling like people have those key messages. So not only they're comfortable, but then especially if they're an example like a surgeon or someone else who's dealing with a customer, really well equipped to answer the questions that are going to come to them. So I think it's kind of that thinking about all those pieces of the human, of what's like the emotions they're going through, then like really the practical, how do they build the awareness, and then all the way through to having the communications to build the confidence to represent it themselves.
That's great. And I also want to maybe pause for a moment too and mention for folks that are watching in live as well, if you have any questions, feel free to add them into the chat, and we're happy to try to address them as we go forward with the conversation. So maybe picking up on one of the threads, Anthony, you talked a little bit about this. You've hit this maybe a few times about a highly regulated environment. Always, it's an important thing to keep in mind in the work that you were doing. And so we're also working on the edge. So as you have edge AI start to evolve, like, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities as you think about sort of the involvement of edge AI technologies, the regulatory environment, and how you were starting to sort of deal with those, and how did you overcome them?
Sure. So I think overall, just thinking about some of the challenges, resource constraints are relatively high in top of the list. One is the availability of talent, because things are evolving and changing really fast. And I think Toma can attest to this. What we did a year and a half ago is almost being obsolete today, right? Given the evolution of technology. So trying to keep up with that. And the availability of high quality data. There is data, but the quality of the data matters, and that will lead to what actually happens. Then on the regulatory front, whether it's privacy, security, compliance, regulatory, it's really a moving target right now. There's a lot of regulators and different governments and agencies are trying to figure out where to really draw the guardrails. One, just in general, and then second, when it comes to healthcare data and medical device, it's just an added layer on top of that. So it's an evolution. I think if I were to go ask 10 hospital administrators or 10 CIOs of hospitals, I know I'm going to get more than 10 answers from them, because it's evolving. So that's something that we need to keep intact, because there's not a standard per se that's available. Yes, there's some of the traditional security controls, SOC 2, high trust, etc. But that has to somehow adjust to be GDPR compliant and HIPAA compliant, etc. to be on medical device side. So I think that those are some of the challenges, but then also on the opportunity side, I think there are some very interesting things. I think the ability to personalize the experience by leveraging a significant amount of data and being able to deliver it real time has a huge benefit. And then this also opens several avenues for new business models, and then be able to monetize knowledge and insights like not done before. And I think this kind of is going to create some kind of a flywheel effect where the speed of innovation is going to accelerate significantly, because the possibilities that are going to come together and be able to bring in large sets of insights together. So I think it's yes, there are challenges, and I think we'll have to work through them as we go along. But I think the opportunities hopefully offset the challenges and give us enough momentum to continue to move forward.
Yeah, I love the flywheel analogy, and also building on that a little bit. One of the things we see from our State of the AI Enterprise report is that we heard a ton of people excited about AI and Gen AI and what we can do with it. There was also a lot of feedback. A lot of respondents were saying, and we feel like there needs to be more regulation and more sort of standards and some governance around these things, which is, I always feel like very interesting to start to see the community saying, hey, we love this, it's great. And we need some regulations, some guidance around how to handle this within our organizations. Because I would imagine as we get more standardization, your ability to kind of respond will be a little bit easier. The cost to build things would be a little bit less, I would hope. Tomer, I want to pivot to you for a little bit too. This concept of doing edge AI seems very complex. There's a lot of nuances with things you're dealing with on that. And anything you'd add to some of the things Anthony was saying, about this conversation, both about the edge and also some of the regulatory environment?
Okay, so in the aspect of regulatory, I can separate the answer to several domains. So in the aspect of medical devices, if we're looking at the USA, so we have the regulation from the FDA. Now, beyond that, like you said, the companies, so if we look at OpenAI and other companies, they ask to be regulated because they see the power of generative AI. If we look at the large language models, they see the power and they're saying, okay, this needs to be regulated. Now, of course, there are issues that on one hand, maybe you can enforce some regulation on companies, but on the other hand, you do have open source large language models, okay? So now it's not only in the hands of the giants, so it's also in the hands of the community. And there are always the issues of what happens if you over-regulate your industry and other countries don't do that, what happens in this race. But anyway, right now, I think that AI evolves much faster than anything, plus it's probably hard to regulate it once you can use these large language models even on your own laptop. So this becomes harder to regulate.
Yeah, for sure. And Laura, what are some of your thoughts on this regulation concept as well? What are you hearing on the topic?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing, well, one of the stats that I point to, we were talking about trust a little bit earlier, is that workers who are confident in their organization's approach to responsible data and how they're using that data are 35% more likely to trust the organization. So I think it's whether there's regulation or not, even what we're seeing of pressures internally to understand what's going on, be part of it, right? All the generational trends show, right? Millennials and Gen Z are increasingly more of an activist in their organizations, that they're pushing for this internally to understand what it means for, their market, to understand what it means for their customers or their clients, to understand what it means for them in their roles and day to day. So I think that's really an added pressure that we've seen a lot of, internal sentiment on other topics hitting, front pages of the news. So another consideration for companies as they're making these types of decisions.
It makes sense. One thing too, Laura, I wanted to hit on, because we have a comment in the chat that I think would be interesting, was someone mentioned, it's almost like you need a communication plan to empathetically introduce AI. I think it's kind of interesting. I was going to ask you, are you using Gen AI and AI in the tools that we're using to help communicate to people about AI?
Right. Well, those are definitely use cases. Anything around content creation is one of the first and most promising opportunities for Gen AI. It is definitely, I would say, at the early stages of needing to be reviewed by humans. But it's a really interesting concept, right? Because how are we using some of these tools to make, the scale of the communications we need easier? So I really love that. Another place I'm seeing Gen AI being used about AI in the work world is thinking about the implications to jobs, right? We know from publicly available sources, we see all these reports coming out from the World Economic Forum. What are the jobs that are most likely to be impacted by AI? And impacted does not necessarily mean replaced or displaced. It can mean augmented, it can mean changed. Yes, there are likely roles that we will not have in the next 3 years in our organizations. But that's another place that I see us looking at. How can we look at all these sources of data that are looking at macro factors and what skills are on the rise, what skills are declining, to help make some of those predictions and actually better shape and get ahead of it to give the workforce information about those rising skills, right? To prepare them. We all have access from an equity perspective, that same information, helping them prepare and have the opportunities to do things like AI academies, AI fluency, right? To be building their own skills and things like prompting. So that's a story of something we're doing internally at Deloitte. We have an AI academy. That's something that we do with other organizations. And that's one I've seen take a lot of, be really at the top of mind for a lot of our leaders in organizations as something immediate that they can do right now to show that empathy, right? I'm not just talking about AI, I'm giving you something that you can also do and participate and learn as the rest of the world is learning.
And I think as leaders, the responsibility to show that you're using the technology too and embracing it and saying, hey, I'm actually trying this too. I'm using it, and here's how it's, helping to improve the work that I'm doing. I think is also super important to embracing it. Tomer, we got a question for you as well that came in from the chat. Questions about, do you have great use cases which you've come across where you can say, yes, this company has really understood AI, they've nailed it, best solution, great customer user experience. What would your example be?
Okay, I think there are many examples because if in the past, when companies come to you and they speak to you and you're saying AI, then they are very, maybe they don't believe you so much. But I think this changed considerably in the last years. And today, even for someone, like people say, like to someone's grandmother, yes, if people know ChatGPT, so they already know AI. Now, the aspects of the companies, we've been developing for many companies. So in homeland security, surveillance cameras, etc. So all of the systems, of course, they use neural networks for the detection, segmentation, tracking, etc. In the aspects of medical devices, the same, because the core technology, which is computer vision, the state of the art, in the academy, in the industry, it's neural networks. So the algorithms shifted since 2012 with the introduction of AlexNet, since that year. So that's if we look on the medical devices. Beyond that, you have the industrial inspection companies where you have the fabs and you're inspecting the wafers, etc. These technologies are also of computer vision and, of course, also use neural networks. Beyond that, if we look more broadly on the aspects of generative AI, I think there is no conversation that mentions generative AI and someone doesn't mention ChatGPT. So since the introduction of ChatGPT 13 November 2022, my mistake. Anyway, so this has set a benchmark, a very high benchmark. From this, that other customers started using the API, etc., and incorporate it into their systems. Beyond that, of course, we can see this in the day-to-day. Microsoft, they are incorporating this into the many of the copilots. We have the GitHub Copilot. So I think AI, generative AI, starts to be everywhere because it's going to be integrated even into our operating system. So us as users now that we will look for files, organize my files, etc., this is where it's going.
I think it's hard to imagine. When I've talked to some people, you're probably already using generative AI, or today you might not even know it with the embedded capabilities that are in the applications that you're engaging with. And I think that's also sort of hitting a little bit on the trust conversation too, Laura. Like, oh gosh, maybe I'm using this technology, I'm really uncomfortable to even start using it. What does that actually mean? I think Anthony, I'd love to get your perspective too, a little bit about what you're seeing internally. So as you think about your organization and how you're trying to you're transforming products and what you're selling, but also how do you think about your business and transforming some of the internal operations around AI and Gen AI?
Yeah, Jim, I think the one word that I'll throw out, what generative AI is doing for us is really the acceleration of development, because still on mostly a classical model of building neural networks based on data and segmentation of data, etc. But that can exponentially speed up with using some of the language learning models and using multiple sources. So that will change how we move forward and how we develop and build confidence in what we have versus what we've had in the past. So I see it in a positive light, but I think it's the burden of proof is slightly higher early on. But I think that curve will drop off as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that leads to an interesting question. Laura, back to you for a little bit about if you've got leaders or you got individuals that are resistant to change, what are some other tips, that we should be thinking about as we start to help people on that journey? You've talked about trust a lot and other ways to engage the organization and personas and the design process. Other things we should be considering?
Yeah, I love the example you said earlier of just showing leaders role modeling how they're using it. I heard a great example the other day of someone who was trying to teach another individual who was not an early adopter about using one of these large language models, and they actually gave someone, their spouse, access to their ChatGPT history and said, look at how I'm prompting, right? And it was kind of like reverse engineering, like, let me just show you, right? And I see a lot of organizations trying this idea, even if they don't have, they're not engineering organizations that are going to do a hackathon, they're looking at a promptathon. So taking business users, right, and saying, what's a problem that we want to solve? And kind of starting to use just the prompting of let's think about what's a problem that's worth solving for our customers, right? And giving them some access to some of the generative AI tools that they're using internally, and then seeing kind of what happens when they make that competitive, give people a few weeks and come back and solve those problems. And there's just some really interesting learnings that come out of that. One, I think you have identified immediately your kind of early adopters, your change champions, right? People emerge who wanted to participate in something like this that you didn't even know existed in the organization. So that is, that's a huge kind of thing, number one. Thing number two is you're teaching really business acumen skills, right? And thinking about what's a problem that's worth solving. You have to think, is this viable? Is it feasible? Is it of value? Will it have impact? So really some critical thinking skills on the business solution. And then in the presentation of it, right, I have participated in these where it became kind of like a competition, and then there was an awards ceremony, and you're teaching, again, these human business skills around pitching an idea. And how do you make that the most compelling? And how do you tie together the problem and have some creative submission around it? So I give those really practical examples because I think integrating AI into your workplace has all these different levels to hit it at, right? You're talking about it, and business leaders have a consistent message. To do that, they have to have some consistency and maybe a AI COE or some way that they're connecting in with other leaders and how they're talking about it. Then that they're giving people that opportunity to participate, like the promptathons. And then number three, that they're being visible in how that process is going, right? What are we learning every quarter? I think being able to share that really touches on a culture of innovation, which many organizations have put in their philosophy for years. And this is actually a really ripe way to hinge onto that and actually show how are we creating prototypes and POCs, how are we doing retrospectives and talking about the learnings to really bake that into their process of how they're engaging with AI.
As you're saying, I was constantly thinking, yes, culture of innovation. That's exactly what I feel like you're talking about. And how do we infuse that? Because we've talked so much about these things for years, but what's the reality of it? Quickly, Anthony or Tomer, any thoughts on that culture of innovation? You guys, Tomer from leading Optimizer, Anthony from the organization, how do you guys, have you guys thought about that in terms of some of this? Love your take.
I think from our end, I think for innovation, like I said, it just broadened the horizon, and I feel that it removed boundaries that existed within an organization and kind of opened it up to a much wider aperture and a much diverse group that's even outside of the field of expertise, and actually give that consideration that we probably have not considered as something that could add value. So I think it really opened up the aperture to possibilities, and the funnel kind of gets filled up pretty quickly, and you have a lot in the funnel that you actually can process now, and processing also now becomes more efficient in trying to filter things out and get to a higher order value.
Tomer, any thoughts from you?
I think generally the aspects of AI, innovative field, like Anthony said, the things that we did even 1.5 years ago, now you're doing other things. It evolves so fast right now. It's the most evolving subject matter, it's the most evolving in the world. And there is also a technical reason that I thought about this and to analyze why. And I think one of the reasons is that neural networks became the foundation of many verticals, like text translation, of course, computer vision, many aspects which in the past you had the specific expertise of that domain. Now everything came to usage of neural networks. So it's a lot of audience in the academy, in the industry, which are using basically the same building blocks, of course, for different use cases.
Thanks, Tomer. And I think maybe just for the sake of time, I want to ask the group one final question. And it's going to ask them to sort of think out into the future a little bit, putting on a view maybe, let's say, 5 years out, but you can change the rules on this if you need it to be shorter or longer term. And Laura, I'm going to pick on you first. What do you see as like the next big innovation you're excited about or you're seeing 5 years out? Did you want to go on record that we're recording so we can hold you accountable?
I love that. Well, I've learned that I can't predict even what happens in like 12 months. So if this has told me anything, right? Like companies change over a weekend and the pace is so fast. What I do see though is we're talking a lot about Gen AI, and we are, we still don't see that many organizations who have really come out of proofs of concepts and are at scale, right? A lot of organizations are figuring out how do we scale this? We've been experimenting. So I think the biggest shift in 5 years, I hope that we've experimented and that we feel confident that a lot of organizations have learned from that and they are at some scale. I think from the workforce, we're going to look at really skills very differently. When I hear about what should people be studying in college, right? We flipped like 12 months ago, maybe 18, 24 months ago, we said everyone should be a data scientist and go learn all these technical skills. And then, fast forward, we said, actually, you don't need data science skills. You can use natural language. So don't study that. Instead, study the humanities, ask questions, learn about history, right? So we're kind of all over the place, I think, in terms of, do we want people to be more technical? Do we want them to be more human? And obviously the answer is we're going to need a bit of everyone, of all those skills in the workforce. So I think in the next 5 years, it will be doubling down on what are some of those soft skills. Like I think there will be a swing back to that. I think the early adopters, right? There's this quote out there, you will not be replaced by AI, but you will be replaced by someone using AI. Like to make all people that are using AI will be a lot of integration of people doing more with it in their day-to-day lives, right? The things that I know early in my career, I was doing a lot of Microsoft PowerPoint presentations and other sort of visual like slides and, name your different application, a lot of like manual putting things together. And we are not going to need, the same number of people doing those types of things anymore. So there's a natural evolution of the nature of work obviously for engineers and more technical folks and even the average business users. So I look forward to seeing, it'll be common knowledge to have a basic set of tech fluency, and then doubling down on what are those things that, if AI can do all of this for us, what are those things that human, stay better at, and some of that critical thinking, the analysis, the subject matter expertise, continuing to be really required skills in the next 5 years.
That's great. All right, Tomer, over to you, and then we'll hit Anthony at the end.
Okay, so like Laura said, I think the same, that giving predictions, if I look at my past predictions, sometimes you can be very certain, but sometimes you don't know where the surprise comes from. So I think my predictions are, are taking what I see right now to further extremes. So generally, there are many aspects. The first thing, of course, we see in generative AI. We see in the aspects of image creation, video creation. We see the use cases. We see that you cannot recognize something that is real and something that is fake, because if you were able to do this, so the AI could have been better and then would have improved. Beyond that, we see the aspects of copilots, and we need to remember there are millions and billions being invested in this, and this gets improved, and it will be, technology doesn't stop. So it will arrive to a level that it will be better than every human, the same way that it happened in chess games and in other kind of games. So once it goes there, the technical skills of the programmer, you will require different skills, yes, but anyway, it will arrive to that level. Beyond that, think of the varieties that we're going to get. In the aspects of music generation, there are also neural networks for games generation, okay? There are two aspects. Some can watch games being played and generate the game. Of course, this is only the beginning, because there was an example of a Pac-Man game being played, and an AI generated this Pac-Man game. It saw the graphics, it understood the rule, and generated the game. And there are more advanced things which are being developed these days. Beyond that, let's take all of this to the next level. What we are missing, and I do see that the generative AI, LLM, NLP, etc., everything made a huge leap, and the robotics that we see in the day-to-day is not there yet. Mm-hmm. We still don't have autonomous vehicles driving, and we don't see robotics everywhere. But once this will catch up, and you have the brains of the AI, so you're going to see many other use cases. And even if we look at the medical sphere, right now, it's supporting the surgeons, but then it can assist them much more. I don't know if someone will let it do the procedure, of course, regulation, etc. But the robotics capabilities will also arrive there. So these are my predictions, like over many verticals.
I love it. And Anthony, I think that was a tee up for you on some of those robotics predictions. I don't know.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, I think variability today is very wide. It's based on skill, experience, and it is causing a significant number of complications. And today, surgery is an art. The way it's taught and how it's implemented. And our prediction is, or my prediction, fast forward, is that we have the ability to convert the art of surgery to a science of surgery, and be very precise, very predictable, and achieve a certain level of standardization with a very nice backup of data and evidence to prove that the outcome can be accomplished and delivered. So I think we're not too far from that, and I think we're laying the foundations to get to that point. But I think within the next 5 years, we should be able to get to a level of standardization and deliver better outcomes.
That's great. Well, thank you guys very much. I appreciate your time today, and to our listeners, thank you very much. I think it's been a great dialogue. We've covered a lot of different topics, going across from engineering these solutions to the complications associated with it, building them reliably, allowing them to work at speed that we need to be successful in the use cases they're deployed for, all the way to the human experience associated with this, the change management required to get leaders in the organization to adopt it. How do we overcome some of those fears? And ultimately, what do we see for the next 5 years, which I think is really exciting, and a journey that, I'm personally very passionate about, and excited that we're going to be on that journey together. So thank you all very much. We've got another session coming up in April, and looking forward to further dialogue. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.